Being here in Portland has forever changed our imagination for Jesus Church and what Jesus Church can do. In a post-Christian context like Portland, that prophetic picture in Isaiah 43 of the Lord making a way in the wilderness and bringing rivers in a desert, that is a prophetic picture of the church, man.
Mm.
In a city that has just lost its way. And I say this with just a broken heart. And honestly, it just feels like a wilderness. It's dry. This vision of the church coming in and offering a way, offering purpose, offering life, and functioning like a river.
Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, well, welcome back to the Jesus in the Upper Left podcast. I am Pete Armstrong with Park Lane Church, and I'm here with my co-host, Gabe Kolstad. And our guest today is Christopher Coffman. Welcome.
Happy to join you guys. I'm grateful for the friendship now with both of you that spanned over a decade. So, so grateful to just be grayer and still at it with you guys here in the city, man.
Hey, love that. Amen to that. And that makes three of us. Yeah. So, Christopher, why don't you share with our the folks listening just a little bit about yourself, like your background, your family, just kind of where you're at in life right now.
Sure. Yeah. So I was actually born in Canada, in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so growing up, had one foot up in the Great White North. And my family, my dad's side of the family, had family down in Arizona. And on both sides of the equation, there was just not deep faith. And so grew up in an agnostic family, came to faith, heard the gospel in my teenage years, got an invitation to a Young Life meeting. I didn't know it was a Christian meeting. I thought and was flattered that a really, really cute girl that I was interested in invited me, and people were playing basketball and eating pizza. And I was shocked when a guy opened the Bible and started talking about Jesus, the suffering servant from Isaiah. And it turned my world upside down. I actually was radically converted, actually filled with the Holy Spirit that night. My parents thought I joined a cult. Just had a radical encounter with Jesus in my teenage years. And that just really disrupted the trajectory of my whole life. And so felt a call to ministry when I was 18 years old through just a prophetic word that was shared with me in a church that actually leaned towards being more cessationist, and so didn't even exercise those gifts. But it was just like a hard knock from Jesus in my life, where this assignment of preaching the good news of Jesus, binding up the brokenhearted, going into places where there's just ashes and bringing the beauty of the gospel, raising up, devastated cities. Those have been touch points ever since I was 18 years old and didn't even have a category for like a prophetic word. And it led me to go and to seek out a degree in Bible college in the Midwest in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, like the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. I met my wife, Julie, there. And our adventure continued. The Lord led us with our Bible college degrees in hand into the trenches of church planting, which I don't recommend. It was not wise. It was not recommended. But the Lord's just been faithful. And so our journey over the years with lots of scars and more stories of God's faithfulness than just tears, it led us here to the Pacific Northwest almost 16 years ago. So I am on staff at a church that I love with all of my heart called River West. And I have been functioning as one of the teaching pastors. I oversee our local and international mission teams and also just kind of lead the charge with a lot of our leadership development these days. So that's a high point overview of just the journey that's kind of brought me here.
Yeah, amazing. And I think, yeah, we first met about 7 years ago at an event, trying to serve the houseless population, and a lot of, maybe people know you through your work, like with the Palau Association, and tell us a little bit more about that, like what you feel like your calling is to the wider body of Christ in Portland.
Yeah. Yeah, both for my wife and I think one of our core values that's always been one of those reference points on the compass is just a passion to see Christ Church unified. And so for the movement here in Portland, for people that aren't super familiar with it, it dates back to like about 16 years ago, the most recent iteration of churches coming together and seeking ways to unify, to advance the spread of the gospel, to pray together, to serve the complex needs of our city together. When I came here, got brought alongside other leaders that share that passion for Jesus' high priestly prayer, that we would learn to be one, the way that him and the Father are one. And so I've seen beautiful stories over the years of churches coming into spaces alongside complex needs, foster care, refugee care, resettlement, where no one church or organization can make a dent in these issues. I've seen the power of the churches coming together and unify. So I get to use my leadership to bring other like-minded leaders and churches into those spaces to try and just build those collaboratives that actually help us like intensify, amplify our impact as the capital C church in the city.
Yeah. And has that always been part of your role at River West, or tell us a little bit about navigating that? Because sometimes churches are like, hey, we love having you here, kind of all the time, and we've got so many opportunities and needs right here in our church, in our neighborhood. How did that come about, and have there been any pressure points?
Yeah, well, it definitely comes with any pressure points, I think, in terms of the demands that churches have, especially these days, where all of us, I think, have reframed just our capacity and our team's capacity. So I have a pretty unique position these days in terms of how I get to invest my time. But I would say, going back to the inception of our church, which was planted about 36 years ago, it was just a desire, a belief that the church doesn't exist for itself. It's
Yes.
like that Dietrich Bonhoeffer attitude of the church exists to glorify Jesus and to serve others. And there's only one capital C church. And so that is I think, a passion and part of the DNA of our church is not just to look inwardly, but to seek ways to actually come alongside other churches and to cooperate together, to not be in competition with other communities that believe that Jesus has called us to be a church for the city. That's just a part of our church's DNA. But I definitely think it hasn't come without developing for our people a shared understanding of how Jesus' kingdom involves seeing his church unified in strategic ways. And so we've preached into that over the years. And so it's something that our people understand these days, but it took intentional preaching and teaching for our people and even our elders to really catch up with Jesus' vision of a unified church, or why pastors would go out of their way to actually spend time together. It wasn't something that just kind of came along with the church's growth over the years.
Hey, Christopher, I feel like I've been watching this from a distance or even sometimes up close with you for a long time, and I've always admired it because you've definitely been one of the ones around the city, I think, that have prioritized this kind of community. And, one of the things that, just from my own standpoint as a lead pastor of a church in our area, that, just with the priorities, I'm wondering how, because it sounds like you've got like the organizational support to reach out this way. But then how do you personally manage the inside outside pull of ministry.
Mm.
So what are some things that you do because I think for those listening, if you're thinking about coming into the Portland context, this right here is a really important aspect of what's working around the city, right? This
Yeah.
shared vision. But schedule wise, sometimes it's
Mm.
really, how do
Yeah.
you make?
Well, I think for me personally over the years, it's just communicating with our elder team. What percentage of my time will I be dedicating into these relationships outside of the walls of our own organization, and to what end? What I've found is was something like this last summer, like the season of service, where we brought together, hundreds of churches, thousands of folks across the city to devote a portion of their time and their energy to actually serve the houseless in our city. That took a chunk of time out of my world. And I typically have a communicated understanding with our elders that I get the freedom to devote up to 20% of my time into this and kind of how that pans out. But they understood this is going to take more time from me to lead, but we're also going to be able to celebrate some unique kingdom stories in a time where the church in our culture doesn't have a lot of really positive press to actually celebrate with our people. Hey, our city right now is fraught with so many complex problems, and people are dividing over all of these issues. But people are going to come together, thousands of folks, to serve our city, to serve the houseless in our community, where our city can't seem to come together on any collective solution around this. We're going to unify and honor Jesus, and then celebrate Christ at Waterfront Park, downtown, lift up the name of Jesus downtown. It was like all of this is headed towards, I think, a clear goal that was communicated. We're going to invest. This is going to take my time, but here's what we're hoping to celebrate at the end of this. And so I think trying to just bring a strategic but also concrete why, like before your leaders, will help, I think, them catch up with this passion if it's in your heart as a pastor, but not like removing these moments from the congregation. I just think these are powerful stories that actually enhance our people's understanding of the kingdom of God, and it's really encouraging. So.
That's
What one of our guests a while back shared something about like sort of the parish model or parish mentality of ministry, where sometimes we go, well, I'm on staff at this church, or I'm a pastor of this church, but rather to say, no, I'm a pastor to the city of Beaverton, or I'm a pastor of the city of Lake Oswego, or I'm a pastor of the city of Portland, and it includes these other ministries. I think it's such a more sustainable model, really. And also, I love that you're practicing that, Christopher. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I think, you can hold a passion for being somebody that's all about the parish. So Eugene Peterson is like one of my heroes of the faith, and really just held, a deep theological understanding and a commitment to just be proximate, to not say yes to every opportunity and every speaking engagement that comes up, to say yes over platform, over his parish. And so to be faithful, I don't think that you can say yes to every platform invitation if you're truly called to be a pastor, a leader that invests in the city gospel movement. You can't hop on every podcast. Like, you can't speak at every engagement. This is my plus one. This is an extension of our church's larger ministry. So you have to say no to actually, I think, be proximate and faithful, and accessible to your people as well.
Yeah, I love that Eugene Peterson when he wrote, go to the closest church to you and stay there as long as you possibly can.
That's right, man. Yeah.
And the ultimate kind of proximate parish idea. But So yeah, you alluded to it earlier, Christopher, but Portland has been getting some bad press, but we are people of good news, right? And we want to share
Mhm.
like what God is doing in a powerful way and encourage people. So what are some things that have really made Portland home for you and your family, like, and things that you love about ministry here?
Yeah. My wife and I, we were just talking about this the other night on a date night. Being here in Portland has forever changed our imagination for Jesus Church and what Jesus Church can do. In a post-Christian context like Portland, that prophetic picture in Isaiah 43 of the Lord making a way in the wilderness and bringing rivers in a desert, that is a prophetic picture of the church, man.
Mm.
In a city that has just lost its way. And I say this with just a broken heart. And honestly, it just feels like a wilderness. It's dry. This vision of the church coming in and offering a way, offering purpose, offering life, and functioning like a river. One of the gifts of my job, I've gotten to travel all around the world to see Jesus' global church. And for some reason, we as human beings, we build cities around rivers, you guys. Yeah, we as a city, we're built around this river. And this like prophetic picture of the church going in to places where it's a cultural wilderness. It's dry. It feels lifeless. It's hard. Welcome to post-Christian, post-everything Portland. But so many cities, I would think, leaders, tuning in, you go, no, that's my community, but you're in the Midwest. It's like, the imagination that I used to have as a young leader, my imagination and my dreams for what would happen in ministry, so many of those dreams, they're dead and gone. If I was still holding on to them, the pandemic like put them to death. Um, but I think, I've been coming back. I've been reading a lot of Isaiah recently, and I know Jesus did as well. And I think Jesus has a dream for his church in our cultural moment right now where there's so much hopelessness, there's so much hurt that his church would actually be like a way in the wilderness and function as a river through a desert, bringing life, bringing flourishing. Man, I have countless stories of how Jesus Church has brought just that to neighborhoods, to communities, to our foster care system, to refugee resettlement agencies that didn't want to cooperate over the years. Wherever the river of God's people together flows, it always brings life. Jesus said it. If you believe in me, you entrust yourself to me, rivers of living water will actually flow out of you. I think we do weird devotional things with that. And I think that Jesus, his imagination is just saturated in Isaiah and all these like prophetic pictures of bringing life into places where it's lifeless, it's hopeless. And so honestly, you guys, I'm indebted because I think my imagination for ministry these days, I'm far more interested in Jesus' dream for his capital C church than any dreams I had as a young, arrogant, idealistic like leader. And so I think I'm coming back and being repossessed by like Jesus' imagination for his church. And I think a lot of the challenges in Portland, it's been the fertile soil that like a lot of us that are still in it have had to go through many waves of reimagining what Jesus Church can look like in this moment. And so that's just a window for my wife and I. Our love for the church has deepened, and in the process, our life has become so rich in friendship with other pastors like you guys, and that's been such a gift. I mean, truly, with all of the hardship over the last 4 or 5 years, there was never a moment that I was alone. And that I mean, it humbles me because I know so many leaders, maybe even people tuning in, they're alone right now. And that's the gift, I think. In this place where it's like some weeks it just feels like a wilderness, man. It's real dry. It's hard. Like, I'm not alone. Like, I have the deepest friendships I've ever had in life, like with other pastors and leaders, and they love me, but they really just they love seeing my life and my ministry benefit Jesus' church. And that is a tremendous gift when you have access to friendships like that.
Yeah.
One of the things, Christopher, that I'm wondering is because I feel the same way you do about those relationships, and you just put some language to some of the ache that I think a lot of us have experienced over the last few years. Just that wrestling and that struggle. I love that we've had to reimagine multiple times. So true. But some of our listeners and some of the people that I'm connecting with, or we're trying to make connections, they are kind of more alone. How do you get from ministry isolation to the kind of you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, man, I don't know if there's ever been a cultural moment where all of us, I personally have had many what I call Elijah moments, like where you feel like it's you and it's you alone, and you just want to sit underneath a tree and die. Like, I love that story in the Old Testament. Like, I am done. I'm totally isolated. And if you remember the story, like, he's afraid. So he's alone and he's afraid. And the inner narrative is, it's just me. It's just me out here. And he despairs of his life. And he asks the Lord, just kill me. Like, I'm going to go underneath the broom tree and die. It's like, I have had so many just broom tree moments. I've always envied people that they just have that, like, that emotional resilience where it's like, man, I can just keep taking hits. I connect with Elijah, man. Apart from my friends that could actually come alongside me in those moments and sit with me, share meals with me, I just would not be in ministry right now. I can say that, like, with full conviction. And I think many of us, if that's like where you're at right now, one, I just think just normalizing that. I think we've bought into a really unhealthy kind of hero concept of the pastor that just keeps enduring for reasons I don't even understand. Elijah's one of the most faithful guys that even shows up at the Transfiguration. They think John the Baptist is Elijah. This is like one of, like, the Hall of Fame, like, saints of the faith. And he's literally saying to God, I'm so depressed right now. Just kill me. Like, I despair of my life. And it's like, man, if you've run out of that kind of hope, what God tells Elijah is this journey is too great for you. I honestly think that medicine right there is what so many of us in ministry, we just need to sit with that. Like, what if God, with tenderness, but with conviction, could really just say to you, this journey's too great for you? Like, so much of the isolation, it's by design. Like, we've inherited this in American ministry. This journey is too great for you. Like, don't go this alone anymore. I think that would go a long way to just helping people realize if that's where you're at and you feel isolated. Elijah's been there. I think Jesus needed friends in Gethsemane. For the Son of God to say, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends, and to need friends in the darkest night of his ministry, then I really need friends. I need friends that can be faithful in those spaces and know me beyond just the network side of me. I think most pastors and leaders, we have access to networks, but networks can be really lonely places where inwardly you feel like Elijah. And I think we need something more than a network. We actually just need honest spiritual friendships, places we're known. That's what we need. And I mean, that's why for me, the Together PDX, to the end of my days, I will actually just share from my journey and my story to help others that are struggling with isolation just actually not do the journey on their own. It's too great for us.
No pastor walks alone. Mark
That's it,
Estes,
man.
genius. Yeah, and that, gosh, so much of what you said, Christopher, resonates with me. And I was reading a newsletter. So, John Tyson from New York City, he writes this brilliant newsletter that I think as like middle-aged men, it just hits me so. But though, the one even this morning was the danger of ungrieved grief.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
wow, I mean, just the inability for us to to sit in our grief and in some of the ministry scars that you kind of alluded to, but just the grief and the pain, and to do that for each other, and to receive from the Holy Spirit, so that we're not burned out on our capacity to sit with other pastors who, gosh, understand us, understand like the unique pressures of it. Such a gift to give to each other, but it also takes that vulnerability, which I think it's really difficult. I will say it's difficult for me, like growing up in church and being a pastor's kid and kind of like being under the microscope a lot. Like, it's still hard for me at 43 to be like, yeah, who can I be vulnerable with? Who can I be? Because we can have lots of what I learned in New York is you can be lonely in a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
God created us. God created us for deep relationships and for
Yeah.
spaces that are safe and vulnerable. So thank you for calling
Mm-hmm.
us
Yeah.
today.
You bet. Man. Well, honestly, I've been on the receiving end. I mean, each of you have been friends to me over the years, and I just feel indebted to pass on what I've received so richly. I know that one of the enemy's, I think, primary strategies is to get us isolated, and that's where, for me personally, again, that Elijah complex, it sets in, man. And it's like, man, you just need a friend that gets you out from the broom tree. Just because I would be there, and would have resigned years ago, and I'd be, stocking shelves at Trader Joe's or something like that without friends that knew me. It doesn't have to be many people, and honestly, it shouldn't be. But I have a handful of friends that know the true me, and I don't have to hide weaknesses. I don't have to project anything false. And I just think pastors these days, it's worth devoting the time so that you don't lose touch with your soul.
So kind of coming back to movement PDX or sorry, together PDX, serve PDX. What would you say to maybe somebody who's thinking about coming to Portland or thinking about starting something like that in their own city? What would you say to, yeah, to invite them into that? How can they be connected to that?
Yeah. I think that one of the best things, leaders can do is find other leaders that care deeply about seeing unity happen within the walls of their church and between other churches. Just find somebody that actually hasn't lost their passion, that Jesus is actually capable of unifying his church, even like right now on I guess the shores of seeing the storm clouds roll in and an election year before us, to see in somebody's eyes like, hey, this unity thing, Jesus praying in his high priestly prayer that we might be one. If find a leader with that core value, um, where they care deeply, they practice that, and just spend time with them instead of just signing up, for a program or starting even with service. I just think if pastors and leaders could just spend some time alongside some leaders that have actually engaged in I guess, the fruit and the benefit of being unified alongside other leaders, and just hear the stories, hear how this has impacted them. I would start with relationship, and everything really would flow out of that. There's so many opportunities here locally to engage in things like the gospel gathering that we just had with Isa McCauley. That was amazing. But you get in a room and you get alongside other leaders, and you begin to get encouraged. That Elijah complex of, it's just me. Like, I've had my head down, and it's like, man, are we going to make it through this? You step into a room and you go, oh, wow. Other leaders are in the trenches. We're all taking hits together. And it really is, it sounds trite, but it's true. It's like, we're going to be stronger as we actually link arms together, knowing that, like, hard times are coming. I don't think that it's just going to let up in terms of the challenges. And so what's the alternative? To just put our heads down, focus on our problems, our programs, and and to watch the witness of Jesus Church diminish. It's like, well, that's pretty depressing. I think we need to like take the risk and just say, man, I'm willing to actually just take a chance. Let's see if our church can engage more deeply. Let's link up with another local church, pull our resources together, pray for one another, have a night of worship. Let's bring our people together and let's give them actually experiences of unity, not just preach on this, but allow them to experience it. So pastors, you experience it first, and then invite your people into an experience. Maybe it's just with one other church, and allow them to experience the power of that.
Yeah.
I love that relationship first thing, because it does seem a little complicated to figure out, well, how are we going to get started? But that's very simple. Kind of could be across the street, across town. And yeah, I think Together PDX brings so many opportunities, like you said. For those of you that are listening, going like, well, I'm not connected, togetherpdx.org/events. There's stuff coming up that you could be a part of. And I love what you're saying, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're coming to the end of the calendar year. What are some of your or the team's like hopes and dreams for the movement in 2024?
Yeah, a big one, here locally, just given the state of emergency around houselessness in our city. A little over a year ago, this was one of those defining moments where I think all of us here locally, we've seen just the dire need in our city for services, and we've seen the before and after, if you've lived here for any time at all, and just the toll that it's taking with people right now that are living on the streets. And so we decided to bring together a collection of nonprofit leaders and church leaders from around the city, and we just threw a big dinner. We got everyone around tables and we said, hey, if we actually strategically found ways to just build bridges with one another, nonprofit ministries making referrals to one another, what if we really could solve some of these issues just by actually communicating more intentionally, building intentional strategic collaborations? We launched this Portland Houseless Care Collaborative as a way of just trying to convene churches and organizations that felt overwhelmed by just how dire the needs are and how complex it is to actually engage faith communities and volunteers and bring resources to the table. And I think my dream and my vision, I'm already seeing signs that it's changing the temperature for so many leaders that felt isolated and alone. When you bring people together and you remind them, you're not the only one that feels frustrated, that feels powerless. I think just getting people's eyes up and kind of off of their own organization, it's gone a long way, I think, to just bringing hope and just a vision of what's possible And we've seen local churches engage in some beautiful ways. And so what I'm hopeful as we're stepping into this year is that the church will step into a place where we can't actually make a dent in this issue just by looking to our civic leaders to change a few policies and clean up our streets. Like it's not working. And so I think this is a moment right now for Jesus Church to step into these rough, hard places to engage locally. But we've identified some strategic ways. So we've brought a simple collaborative network, some simple strategies like the season of service over the summer. But the biggest thing is just fostering relationships and friendships with many of these nonprofit leaders that want to quit on a weekly basis. And just trying to actually stop the revolving door. Because when you have a leader that's gifted and feels called to step in and engage, and you're constantly burning through leaders like that, no wisdom is passed on. And everybody feels like you have to start from scratch. So just shutting off that attrition cycle by actually caring for these leaders. I mean, simple care packages from churches, Starbucks, gift cards, and showing up and saying, hey, you're appreciated and the work that you're doing is hard. It's that kind of that ethic in Galatians where Paul says, do not grow weary of doing good, for in due season you'll actually reap a harvest if you don't give up. Don't give up. Like we're with you. I think it's helped change the overall kind of mindset. And then around so many leaders just feel at the end of themselves and powerless week in and week out to really just advance the equation and make headway. And so I'm hopeful about that, but this is one of those issues where we need to be devoted and faithful and strategic to show up and be present as the church, likely for many years to come, because the toll is so intense here locally, and each week I think we're seeing new ways that it's impacting our community and presenting challenges both to churches, to businesses, to nonprofits across the whole spectrum. But what I've seen over the years is when the problem gets complex enough, then collaboration is not just an extracurricular like option. It's like desperation is our friend. As people of faith, it's like every single movement of prayer, you know what it has in common? People were desperate. And like the times felt like completely hopeless. And that's where we see these spiritual breakthroughs. So I think we have actually reached one of those moments. I thought a year ago I was getting hopeful, and then no, we didn't hit rock bottom. I actually think that we've come really close to rock bottom. And this is the moment right now where honestly the church shines. This is where we as people of faith, it's like, awesome. Now the Lord can actually do what he does best and supernaturally pour out grace for this moment, unify the church, and let's bring some flourishing in. This is where it's like, let's be the people that are known by our good works and come into these spaces and just be the church. And so I'm hopeful about that.
Man, I feel like altar call moment right here for leaders. Like I think people are going to be going like, okay, how am I supposed to get involved? This is very exciting just to think and dream like this. So Christopher, how would somebody take a step practically to get involved in maybe, for example, the Houseless Care Collective that you mentioned?
Yeah. Everything's represented at togetherpdx.org. The Serve PDX team that I lead with many of my friends that just bring so much experience and heart and love for our city. Just reach out to us, and we're here to serve you. This is not a program that just benefits our individual churches. I mean, it really is just all of this is to bless leaders like you. So if you reach out, Elise and myself will find ways where we can help get you connected with what is already going on in our city.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, we just have a few more minutes. If there's anything that you would like to share with us, Christopher or Gabe, just kind of a closing word of challenge and encouragement to those listening.
Man, well, I think maybe this is just me personally and what's going on in my own heart. But recently, I've just been asking the Lord to actually recapture my heart and my imagination for Jesus' dream for His church. The moment I know all of us will likely be familiar with, where Jesus is in Nazareth in the synagogue, and he asks for the scroll from Isaiah to be handed to him. He can turn anywhere, and he turns to such a beautiful prophetic picture. The Spirit of the Lord is on me. The Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to bring beauty in places where there is ashes, to bring a garment of praise to those that have a spirit of despair, that they may be oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. They will raise up the ancient ruins and repair the ruined cities. That's a dream. I think that's Jesus' dream for his church, you guys. Jesus has a dream. And unlike our dreams, these are not like wishful thinking. This is like a prophetic promise. He said, today in your hearing, this is fulfilled. I've come to bring my kingdom. That kingdom is not insecure. Like it can't be thwarted. He's bringing it, but I think so many I know myself. There's been so many moments where I lost my imagination and just got disconnected from Jesus' dream for his church. I would just say, if that's you, pastor, I would turn to places that I think Jesus turned, to prophetic books like Isaiah, and just immerse yourself in God's vision for his church. Like, get your imagination back and get it from Jesus. And if you do, I think that will likely get you in trouble, because they wanted to throw Jesus off a cliff. Like when he wanted to bring his church, but actually in a way that benefited the nameless widow from Zarephath and like Naaman the Syrian. And they're like, let's kill him. They marveled at his words. They're like, Jesus, that's a really inspirational devo. And then they want to kill Jesus the next second. So prepare yourself. If you actually say, okay, Lord, just reawaken my heart, recapture my imagination with your dream for the church, I think people will marvel and other people will want to throw you off a cliff. It's like, because it will press into stereotypes. It'll press into places where there's division. And yet I think that we need to be leaders that step in and are willing to take those risks to see Jesus' dream for his church advance in this moment. And I really do believe, you guys, the most beautiful stories are yet to come. In so many of our cities where there's so many complex needs, this is fertile soil for movements of prayer. This is fertile soil for new collaborative networks of churches banding together in creative ways. The soil is good. It's good. If anything, we've watered it, I think, with our tears through the pandemic, and the soil's good. So this is a time, I think, to plant, to dream, to take that risk and get your imagination back.
Dude, I'm fired up.
I love that.
Thank you so much for sharing from your heart today.
Yeah, you guys.
From the Columbia and the Willamette to the Mississippi to the Hudson River, may the river of Jesus flow into those cities. Yeah.
Man.
Thank you, Christopher.
You bet.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.